All right, guys. Aaron, Ultra Performance here, bringing you today episode 4 of Coach's Q&A. So today I'm going to have Liz Hogan on, very established women's lacrosse player, Team USA, multiple time All-Star, pro player, very renowned in also the coaching space as well, has worked with numerous different colleges, and I'll be having her on in a moment. Here we go. Liz, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm good. What about yourself?
It's good.
How's your day been?
It's much better.
I think you might be breaking up just a little there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. That's much better.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, today was a lot less hectic than yesterday, so stoked to be able to make today work. But
Nice. How'd the wedding tasting go?
So what they don't tell you is to pace yourself. So I just, try a couple things. There was 6 appetizers, 4 full meals, and then desserts, and I was full by after the first full meal. So I was like, this is not good.
And it's the sort of thing where you don't really have a choice to stop eating there because you need to test everything, obviously.
You have to. It's like your duty to test everything. And I'm like, you need me to test the desserts? Absolutely. Like, I'll do it.
I will sacrifice. I will be the one.
I know. Someone has to do it, right?
Exactly. How have the past sort of 5-6 months been for you in terms of regards to your training and coaching and the like?
It's been really challenging. It's finally starting to open up here a little bit more in California. So my high school lacrosse team is back in session. We're back doing our practices. We have our first game next Friday, which is awesome. And then I've been fortunate enough to have a couple teammates near me and been able to train with them, actual lacrosse skills in addition to what I do outside of lacrosse. So it's slowly coming back together, which has been super nice.
So it's a bit of a very slow sort of step-by-step process. Obviously, the people that have been like yourself and the people you've been working with that have been grinding over that sort of period, you can come back, maybe not missing a bit, you might be a little step sort of slower, but having most of those core skills intact, whereas I'm sure a lot of the other people that may not have been grinding as hard will come back very off the beat, per se. So it's going to be quite interesting when you get back to that first game to see what level of parity is actually there amongst different schools and teams and the like.
For sure. And actually, I took a year off out of college before I got back into the U.S. team. And I would say it was actually probably like one of the best things for my development. And I'm not sure if my body just needed the break or what have you, but mentally, for sure, I was in a much better place. And I've been noticing a lot of the college players just come back kind of with a vengeance. So I'm kind of stoked for that. It's almost like a blessing in disguise.
100%. Like it's always an interesting perspective to see like the mental side. Like, yeah, okay, the physical skills are one thing, but if your drive and intent and motivation to be the best there isn't at its all-time high, it doesn't matter if your physical skills are as primed as they can be. Like the mind obviously controls all there. And it's interesting, like obviously going through the sort of high performance stream of probably a lot of club teams and stuff like that as well. When you've gone through high school, then you get to college and it just ups its level of seriousness and the intent and the time of training, and it just starts to boil over. And that break there can often be the sort of linchpin that reignites your love for the sport. Like rather than just being burnt into the ground and run, and you kind of almost don't take a breath for yourself there. And then having that time to explore outside of the sport and not be defined by one sort of thing like that can often lead to positive in the long run. Like whether it be maybe an injury that's forced you to sort of retake that position of your life and the like. It's quite an interesting thing when someone has time away and it's a benefit for them rather than most people viewing it as a negative.
For sure. Yeah, no, I feel that. And I'm hoping for positive vibes and everything. But to your point, I think it's kind of a blessing. You can do with it what you want. Either you take it to your advantage or you don't. So I'm trying to take everything from it that I can.
100%. Yeah, the last sort of couple months in regards to your coaching would have been a stretch of the skill set for sure. Whether I'm not too sure what sort of what like the state has put as restrictions and the like, because obviously every country is quite in a different state. Like at the moment in Australia, we're quite fortunate to have our COVID situation under control. So like
So
no
jealous.
masks really. Of course, of course. It is easy being on an island in the middle of nowhere compared to everywhere else. But yeah, we're quite lucky in that regard where most of our restrictions have been lifted at this point. So it's getting back to normality. But I do obviously a lot of coaching and PTing and the like. And through that period when it was at its worst, required a lot of adaptation. Like how have you felt your coaching has had to sort of modify and change across that time period?
Yeah, it's interesting in 2 points. Like, right, the first point is we weren't allowed to have contact for the longest time. So, like, physical contact, not, interacting with people, but more so, we could do stick work, but you couldn't do like a one-on-one. And so from a player perspective, that's really hard, both, offensively and defensively. Like, it's just, there's no such thing as getting a real live rep.
Exactly. It's a completely different game.
Yeah, like cones do nothing in my opinion. So I mean, you can use cones or whatever, but it's not going to be the real thing. But then on the flip side too, trying to get your body to put that same force and pressure that you would going against a human is also really challenging. So I've definitely had to adapt a little bit more, but also, in some respects there's nothing you can do. So just getting them the best they can and really trying to get them mentally to envision what they would be seeing, even though the person may not be there, I think is so key.
100%. Like the visualization is a big thing there, whether it be off the field, sort of your own visualization of running through mentally, like how it feels to be in this position to go against a person in this sort of angle and the like, or while you're actually in the position, whether it be a defender trying to drop step or an attacker making a move or something like that. Doing it with the intent that there is someone there rather than just, oh, there's a cone here, I can get past the cone because the cone's not going to move.
Exactly.
And it's a big dichotomy there between the two sort of dodges or drop steps or whatever it may be. And really trying to get the most out of every rep you can there is such a different perspective to, oh, I can just run past the cone and score.
Yeah, and I think that's what separates, like the good players from the great players. And something I didn't really realize, but like I wouldn't call it daydreaming, but envisioning what I was doing, not only like making saves, but letting goals in, how I was reacting. And I think when you're in a position like we are now in a pandemic, when maybe you actually can't go against someone, it's the person that's going to be able to really visualize the whole game in front of them so that when it does come to fruition, they haven't lost any step, right? Like they've seen that defender in front of them or they've seen that attacker in front of them and they're reacting, they've seen everything. And we talk about like the players see 2 steps ahead, and maybe that's what we were doing the whole time is living in a pandemic and, being able to do that. So,
100%.
yeah, so I kind of really like it. I think that's a huge advantage. And, the first thing I always ask my players is like, what does a cone tell you? And they're like, well, it tells me to dodge. I'm like, but pretend you don't have lacrosse. Like, what does a cone tell you? Like maybe stop, maybe move. Yeah. No, it doesn't tell you anything. But
it can be interpreted many different ways.
Yeah, but if you have a defender there, right? Like you're looking at her hips, you're looking at her stick, you're reading the distance between you and her, and so yeah, it's a different ballgame when you can have a human. But if you can't, the visualization is absolutely key.
100%. It's almost that sort of split of an external stimulus where you're having to react to something else rather than an internal one where I'm running at a cone, but I'm only concerned with my own movement. The cone is not going to move. I am only thinking about where I'm going and then you go to do that against a real life player and they're just going to pick you off because they're going to move and you're going to still be doing the exact same thing that you were before. So it's almost an interesting sort of split between earlier in a sort of player's career where it's a lot more about that internal and making sure you are in the right position. And then further in the career, it's a lot more about obviously the external, the mental of like, if I can read you, I know that I'm going to be in the right spot. I'm going to move the right way, but it's me reacting to the correct sort of the correct stimulus from the defender and the like.
For sure, the conditions and all of that. Yeah, no, the action and perception is just. But to your point, when you're younger, you still have to learn the move, right? Like that's key number one. You have to be able to do it. So I totally feel that for sure.
It requires a lot more reps when you're younger to get those sort of solid fundamentals to the point where you've developed them as an adult, and it's more about the mental. Like you require a lot less physical reps and maybe not a lot more mental, but the mental side gets you sharper for the game day than those physical ones. Like, you're 30, 31 now, 32?
31, yep.
31, nice. Don't want to sell you short there. Like, I'm sure that you probably would not need to see as many shots in a warm-up as you would have 10 years ago to feel ready, to be dialed in.
That's funny. Like, I feel that way not only in warm-up, but also just in my training in general. And I forget what basketball player it was, but I was reading up on an older basketball player, like late 30s, maybe even early 40s. And he was like, yeah, my body knows, like I can tell you where the rim is at no matter where I'm at. And I kind of feel to that point in my career where I've read enough shooters, I've gotten enough shots to where my body knows what it wants to do or what it should do. And I kind of had that bank of information, whereas even a college goalie is still trying to adjust and gather that information. So I hate warm-ups. The less warm-ups, the better. Let's go.
The less bruises, the better.
Oh my gosh, I just got
No,
one.
I think that's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I just got one. I was shooting around with my U.S. teammates, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I forgot I used to get this like every day. Like, how did I used to do it?
It's quite funny. Yeah, you have that sort of time period off, or even just I guess a decrease in total volume, and you're like, oh yeah, like this is the new norm, and you adapt to it. And then when it spikes back up, you're like, wow, like this was the normal then, but it hasn't been for a while.
Yeah. So we have U.S. tryouts coming out in June, so that'll be a little bit of high intensity there.
That'll be exciting. Where's that held?
So that's in Baltimore, Maryland. So it's back on the East Coast at the U.S. Lacrosse headquarters, and I think they're bringing in about maybe 100 people. So it should be good. It should be a really good fun time.
Awesome. Good luck for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Obviously, being a goalkeeper, I'm sure many people would agree goalkeeping is probably the toughest position in every sport, let alone lacrosse, where you've got a relatively big space, a 6x6, and you've got this tiny rubber ball being absolutely zipped at you. How do you break down with your sort of juniors and college players that you work with in a goalkeeping sense of the skill of goalkeeping from a technical, a physical, and a mental perspective? I'd love to hear a bit about how you break that down.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first part, like you said, is like being a lacrosse goalkeeper, like you're expected to make, like if you're really good, you're making 55% save percentage. So you're still letting in almost like half the shots that come at you. And I think just that awareness of like letting in a goal is okay. I think is one of the biggest things that to develop with your goalkeeper is, you're not in trouble. You haven't like failed me. It's, goals are going to go in. And actually I was watching Taylor Moreno the other day for UNC against my alma mater, Syracuse, and she actually led in, I think it was like 4 goals without any saves. And I think what really defines her as one of the best goalkeepers in the nation right now is she went 4 goals down and still came out, I think, at like 63% that day. So she went from having like a really rough start to an incredible game overall. And mentally, that's where I think the best goalkeepers really lies, that ability to know that the next shot is not dependent on the last shot, right? Like you're going to see a different shooter in a different situation with a different defense from different spots going somewhere else. So we can't let that snowball. So I always try to adjust.
Exactly.
That mental side, I think, is the biggest part with any goalkeeper of any age, to really get them through their head. Like, I don't even know how many goals I've let in my entire career, like probably way too many, but it's going to happen. So that part is always key no matter what age you are. And then I think developmental wise, physically, and saving the ball, for me, it's more, at the end of the day, we want to make a save, right? Like whether it's with your stick or with your body, ideally it's your stick, just because no one wants their body getting beat up. And to me, that shows that you're really tracking the ball. But, really just developing the very basic movements of getting your body and your stick to the ball, right? Not taking a false step back, not doing all these things, but actually really just, for whatever it is, full send, going straight to the ball. And then from there, you can kind of tweak and adjust based on the goalie. But again, we're all built differently. Like I'm only 5'5". There are some goalies that are, 6 feet. There's some goalies that are 5 feet. And we all have to really honor our body size. And I try to preach that too, is, we're all going to play differently. But at the end of the day, if you stop the little rubber ball coming at you, like that's all we need, right? If you can do it consistently.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how it's done.
That's the key. So I think, again, that's a big part to hammer home is even in college lacrosse, like you look at all these goalies, like they all play so differently, right? So finding a style and really soaking up all that knowledge and building your bank of information, I think is really key for any goalie of any age.
For sure. I think lacrosse is one of those sports where you obviously have the fundamentals that are quite sound and everyone has to work on them as a beginner and the like, but you can expand into your own style quite strongly, whereas compared to something maybe, I'd say soccer is a similar sort of thing where there's such room for creativity, but when you've got a stick and you've got all these different angles, both hands, one hand and the like, and then obviously moving to a goalie sort of saving it, there's such an ability to develop your own style there that plays to your strengths that can be just as effective as someone else. It may look completely different. Like you might have a
Totally.
very stick dominant top hand, like up high saving goalkeeper versus someone else that does the splits. Maybe I know John Galloway is quite good with his feet and getting super low to the ground and
Yeah,
pulls off these incredible kick saves without even trying to really get his stick there because he's dialed and he's got his feet to the ball. And like that works and that works for him. May not work for you. You may be much better getting your stick down low. But
yeah,
it's
for
playing to
sure.
your strengths there. And it's really trying to find that balance between having everyone in this one autonomous flow to be this one, not maybe not robotic, but
But kind
one
of.
mold. Putting everyone in the same mold does such a disservice to, I think, everyone's own creativity and individual ability and even intuition there of, I like this position. It feels good for my body. It may not look good, but if I can be effective there and I stop the ball, like, isn't that the goal? Like, if it looks awkward,
Totally.
it looks ugly, and I get there though,
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
the job done.
Totally. And I actually say that all the time. It's like, I don't want you guys to be robots. Like, I have two goalies in my high school team right now, and they play completely differently. And that's fine for me because they look completely differently, right? Like, they play differently. And to your point, John Galloway plays one way. I grew up watching Tillman Johnson, who played for UVA, and and Matt Russell for Navy, and they played like super high arcs, and now everyone's playing like
Mm.
basically on the goal line. And but yeah, just play your style, right? Like make the save, like you said, and uh, yeah, I hate the robotic. No one should look the same. It's kind of like a squat, right? Like we have our high squat, we have our low bar squat, and no one's built the same way. So I don't know why we try to have everyone
Exactly.
be the same way.
100%. It's quite interesting there, talking about sort of previous goalies that have influenced your game. And I feel that many things in sports sort of pendulum back and forth. So in that regard, like they may have influenced the current sort of crop of goalies at the top level, and then now you guys are influencing the people that are coming up, and you may be very big on say fundamental stick saving, like and being very good up high, and that becomes the in trend thing. But then a few other people bring back like low saving and the like. Well, a good example of extrapolating that to basketball would be something like Steph Curry has
Right.
revolutionized the distance shooting game. Before that, it was all about the big man, all about inside in the post and everything.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
then outside shooting has revolutionized the NBA. And now someone like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic are bringing that inside presence back. So it flip flops back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's
To
quite
your point,
interesting to see that in lacrosse as well.
yeah, I guess that's true in life too, right? But I mean, now that you say that, it does make complete sense. Like we idolize these people, we play like them, but in between, there's other generations going on too, right? And so we bring our own style, and then it goes through these cycles. Like next thing you know, bell bottom jeans are coming back, but
100%, 100%. It's
so
quite interesting as well, talking about sort of the mental side of goalkeeping as well. Like you have been a top performer for obviously many, many years now, 15 years plus. All-star, arguably one of the best keepers in the world over that stretch as well. What sort of mental tools have you developed over that time period that help you deal with when you're in a bit of a rut? You've conceded a few goals or just game to game aren't feeling very dialed. Like what do you do to get you through those sort of time periods?
Well, I think I'd be fortunate. Hesitate to say fortunate enough, but like I think part of that is just like anything else, you have to have practice doing it, right? So I've had a lot of moments where
Mm.
they didn't go well, and then the outcome didn't go well either. So I think a little bit of trial and error. But throughout that time, I think I've shifted my focus from wanting to be like the absolute best and being super hypercritical to just wanting to have fun and realizing that when you're in the game, that is the payoff. Like that's what you've been working for, that's what you've been striving for, and what happens in a game happens in a game. Like you can't control the opponent. So
Mm.
it's gone from really being nitpicky and I did this wrong, I did that wrong, and that really snowballs in your own mind, right? Because you're thinking about that, to well, more of a data, I kind of say data driven approach, because I think about, okay, she did this, I did that, it went in the back of the roll because I did this, or vice versa. And really just recognizing what happened rather than putting an emotional blame on either myself or my defenders or what have you. So
I love
moving,
that.
moving on to that. And I find that's really helpful to me, is just saying the story of what happened, right? She took a split dodge, defender missed, shot off stick mid. I saw her shoulders. I thought it was going to go six side high, so I stepped the wrong way. And it is what it is. It's not like, oh man, I really suck, I missed that shot. So it's really helped me in that sense for sure.
100%. I think it's quite interesting in regards to when you're preparing for a game or something like that, and you're feeling very emotional, you get so jacked up and so hyped for the game, and then you get there and you're bubbling over it at the seam, and all it takes is one mistake, one bad shot you thought you should have had, or you get a piece of one and it goes in, and you're ready to explode at that point. You've got all these emotions just bursting out inside of you there. Right, and then as you sort of get further into your career, you play more games, and you learn to control your emotional state better. You learn that, all right, I get to the day, I've prepared myself as best I can. That's all I can control. I go out, I play my game, whether I win, lose, save at 30%, save at 75%. If I've given my best effort and controlled everything I can control, like, you live with the outcome. It is what it is at the end of the day there. And you can never control the real opponent. They are going to do what they're going to do. You go out and give your best effort. And I feel that once you sort of start to understand that, it's a real big, like, clicking sort of position that you're like, all right, well, I can't really control the outcome fully. I can control what I do, and that's about it. And I think that's, a big time in any athlete's life there.
Yeah.
Generally it happens towards the later half of their career.
Yeah,
but
unfortunately,
I think it's quite a big tool there.
Yeah, no, totally. And some people are all like, you have to make the first save to have a good game. I'm like, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen on the first shot. It could be a slam dunk, and then
Exactly.
you can't, you can't rely on that. So I'm a big believer, like you said, just kind of doing your best of what you're given that day. Like, if you come in, you're an energy level of like 20%, and you still do, decently, that could be a great day for you. So trying to honoring what your body and who you are and where you're going with that. So
100%. And often, like, it's very hard to really know what's going on in someone's life. Like, obviously there's so many things that can be extending beyond lacrosse. It could have someone that could be on with your family issues, financial issues, health issues, anything above, but you don't know that when you rock up on the day. So, like, a teammate lets in an easy goal or something like that, rather than, I guess, berating them or just being like, oh, and like negative body language and the like, just staying upbeat, focusing on, like, where did I make a mistake in that play that led to that? May not have been in that play, may have been the day before or anything like that. And it's always trying to take an internal blame perspective, I feel, without being too hard on yourself, obviously, but more of a decision-making sort of thing where, like, how could I have changed this outcome? What could I have done differently, rather than putting it on a teammate or anything like that as well? Is a much better way to let it, like, sit with yourself.
Yeah, and you're not going to change it, right? Like, the goal happened or whatever happened.
Exactly.
So, totally, yeah. So thinking more, I guess, on the growth mindset kind of towards what you're saying is, well, what are you going to do next time that's going to make the difference, for sure. For sure.
100%, especially with something like that, or even if it's a decision against you, whether it be a goal or not, like talking to the ref, blaming a teammate, chirping the opposition. It's the sort of thing that it's not going to change. No ref has ever changed their mind with a player yelling at them saying, you made the wrong decision.
No, never.
Like,
never.
Just go, all right, no emotional sort of connection there. Like, next decision. Always move on, look forward, rather than trying to look back. Because as you were saying before, like, you let the first goal in and it's, oh no, this is going to be a bad game. Like, that doesn't reflect on anything else. You just look forward. Yeah. Look forward.
Yeah, no, totally.
100%.
Yeah.
Next sort of question for you here. Being so close to making multiple national teams for championship sort of squads and never having quite got there, unfortunately, would be a tough experience for anyone to sort of go through. Like, how have those experiences and moments taught you about, I guess, the sport of lacrosse and life as a whole?
Gosh, that's a great question.
It's a deep question.
Yeah, no. So I've missed 2 World Cups. So this is my third time's a charm, hopefully. I think the
Fingers crossed.
The first time was more like I was super young, and you could handle it because you're like, I have a lot of growing to do. Even though I was successful at the college level at that time, it was more just like, okay, I have a lot to work on. The most recent time was a little bit more frustrating just because I thought I was there. There was all the feedback from the coaches that made it seem like it was probable, and whatever happened, and I really struggled with that for a while, and definitely not the way I wanted to go out with. But in the same sense, it gave me a little bit more perspective on life too. Like, this isn't everything, right? Lacrosse isn't everything. I actually happened to be going through a rough time, and then after I got cut, things actually started turning up. I got a new job. I met some new friends, and really started to enjoy life outside of lacrosse. And I was almost ready to kind of lay down the stick, but then again, another year-long break, and then they started to pick up we do rounds of 4 years, but usually that first year is kind of light. So,
Mhm.
getting a little break there and then having a new coach and just new teammates, it was really refreshing. And I kind of went from putting all this pressure on myself to like, you got cut once, like you can't get cut again, to now this time I'm kind of just here for the fun. Like if I'm going to be there and I'm going to be dedicating all this time and effort, like I just want to have fun with it. Like when it gets time to the field, I don't want to be stressed or, negative or anything like that. I just, I want to go out with knowing that I did everything I could, but like I actually enjoyed it. Because I think out of the first 2 trips through like that attempt to get it to World Cup, I just wasn't, happy with it. I was just more just physical.
It's a business trip. It's a business trip rather than a personal trip.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like a lot of people do that, but for me, I need to really enjoy the moment, right? Like if you're going to put in these hours and be away from your family and do all that, then it needs to be something that's fun. So one more year.
It needs to come from a place of love.
Exactly. So one more year and we'll see what happens. But at the very least, I know that these past, I guess now 4 years have been easily the most enjoyable that I've had on my time with the U.S. team. So I think no matter what, I think it's been a really big life journey in terms of figuring out, put your time towards something that you enjoy and that you want to use that time, right? Because time is more valuable than money. It's you don't get it back.
100%.
So.
I think it's a very interesting perspective you've got there of doing it from not a place of, I have to do this, I have to succeed, I have to make this team. It's all like almost a bit of a fear response as well there, where like I may not be good enough, but I'm having to try so much harder to make up for that potential.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the term, the potential not being ready or whatever you may view it as there, to now sort of transitioning to a place of I'm doing it because I enjoy it. I'm doing it because I want to do it. Like if I make it cool, if I don't make it cool, I've enjoyed it nonetheless. And it's coming from a positive emotion standpoint rather than a more of an anxious sort of side over here.
100%,
and I think, that's a very interesting point. And it completely changes your game there. When you're in that sort of more negative emotional state there, or negative might not be the word, but the non-conducive emotional state there. As a goalkeeper, you're playing stiff, you're playing rigid, you're overthinking, you're hypercritical, and it completely throws your game off there. And you compare that to playing from a happy sort of point.
Yeah, when you're, and I think all coaches know this, and especially as performance coaches, is when you're relaxed is when you do your best, right? Like no one does well when you're stiff. You can't move, you can't do anything.
100%.
And yet here we are, like putting pressure on our athletes or what have you. And I, again, to your point, I got to this point where it was probably pretty negative. So I was like, okay, if this happens, then what's going to happen? I'm going to get cut, like very negative. Whereas now it's like, if it happens, well, I'm going to rake the ball out. I'm going to make the next save. So very different mindset.
Exactly.
The very dramatic ending versus this is what happened in life. How are we going to fix it?
100%. I read an awesome book. I can't remember who it's by, but it's called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it essentially chronicles what we're talking about here. And obviously tennis being one of a very top-end mental sports. I think it's very interesting how the more that you sort of think, the more that it takes you away from the play. It puts you within your own sort of brain there and slows down everything that's actually happening. You're playing in your conscious brain there. And that's so inhibitive of true high performance there. And then sort of moving over to the subconscious brain, when you're having that like out-of-body experience, you're in your pure flow state, you're watching yourself play almost. That's what it feels like. When you're just dialed, you're not thinking, you're just reacting to what's happening. You're not thinking, nothing's slowed. There's no filter that everything has to go through. And that's a very interesting point, because going through that sort of time where, I've conceded a goal, I'm getting hypercritical, I'm thinking about what happened, then the next shot's coming, but now I'm thinking about where they were, what angle they had. That's just all slowing that brain and reaction down there. And then being able to get out of that and just, next shot, it's coming, I've seen a million shots, like I'll read it as I do with anyone. Is a very game-changing sort of thing to be able to process. And like, I feel the earlier an athlete or a competitor gets that, the bigger influence that can have on their career. Of, you look at a lot of the sort of youth phenoms and the like, where they're very sort of subconscious performers. And then as they get to that college level where the expectations go up so much, they may sort of dwindle back and forth there, and they may get hypercritical, which is why I feel you see a lot of very extremely talented performers that are having ridiculous 10, 15 point games, potentially swing back here for a couple of games and be in a bit of a slump, but
Yep.
nothing's changed about their skills. They're the same player. Like, they're provided they're not injured and the like what's changed other than maybe their mental approach, their view of the pressure that may or may not be there.
It's kind of like the sophomore slump,
quite an
right?
interesting thing.
Yeah, like
Exactly.
sophomore, right? Like your freshman year, you're just so numb to it because you're a freshman and everything's new and you're just doing it. And then your sophomore year, you come back with these expectations of, I have to do this again. But at the same time,
100%.
like, yeah. No, it's funny you bring up tennis, though. I think the book that changed my mindset on everything was actually about golf. And I think it's extraordinary. It's very similar to that book, but it's about golf. And the thing that changed my whole perspective was, it took you on like a journey of a golf course. And it was like, what if I told you as you go up to the first hole, you're going to do your worst. Like, you're going to get a bogey. It's going to be like your worst hole of golf ever. But then holes 2 through 18 will be your best ever. You will have the best game of golf for your entire life. Like, would you still take that? And of course, everyone's like, absolutely. I would totally shank the first hole to have the rest of them.
Yeah.
And, the moral story is like your first hole doesn't dictate your second hole. They're two very different outlays, two very different things going on. And the second hole doesn't dictate the rest or whatever. But also, like, if you fail on your first, doesn't mean you're going to have a bad day. And I think those two things combined were really just something that set it apart. It was like, okay, if I let a shot in, by someone, it doesn't mean the next shot by someone completely different in a completely different situation isn't going to get saved, or that if I let in 5 doesn't mean the next 12 aren't going to be amazing saves. So another individual sport, or even with doubles like that, I think they have the strongest mental game for sure. I mean, they have to.
Oh, 100%. Golf would be much more intense in terms of that mental game than tennis. Still in the same realm, but golf, yeah, definitely higher, because you are competing against nothing other than yourself really there. Like, you are getting the best performance out of yourself, and that emotional state has time to linger between every hit. Like, similar to being a goalie. Like, if you face a shot, concede, and then don't face another for a couple of minutes, you may feel a bit out of rhythm, a bit out of flow, and it's how well you can keep your mental game dialed in between those reps or attempts or strokes is such a linchpin between good performance and being able to string a consistent game together. And I feel that that's something that's quite underrated with a lot of goalkeepers and the like, where if you're not facing shots every minute or two, like say in something like compared to a box game where goalies are facing 60, 70 shots easy a game. You may only face 10 in an outdoor game, and those 10 are so much more pivotal because the overall scoring is so much lower.
Yeah, I actually think that's a huge, both men and women now have a shot clock, and I'm convinced that the goalies are doing a little bit better now because they're seeing so many more shots, right? Like, there's no longer that lull of you may not see it for however many minutes because your team's taking a little bit more methodical approach. Now it's, you're getting a lot more shots, so whether for better or worse, you're getting into that rhythm, which is pretty awesome to have, for sure.
I think it's quite interesting from a spectator sort of standpoint as well. Like, it definitely encourages a lot more sort of active viewership from people that aren't necessarily within the lacrosse community there, just as a whole, because it's a lot more fast-paced. It's a lot more back and forth. Like, when I was sort of just getting into lacrosse, it would have been about 2013, I remember the next year was like the men's worlds, and Canada beat the US in that one, but it was a score of 7-4 or something like that.
Yeah, it was under 10 for sure.
Exactly, and it was super low scoring, and trying to explain why it was that low scoring to people and showing them, like, I guess, a couple clips, like, they just completely out of the realm of understanding it because it was such a foreign, almost soccer speed game in the sense of very low scoring, a lot of possession trying to be held, compared to where I feel the sport as a whole is going now. And it's completely flipped on its head, where trying to make the Olympics and the like, having to sort of unify a set of rules in like whether it be the 6v6 or a modified sort of 10v10, the game's just speeding up and speeding up. And I feel that works both from a goalie perspective and from a more offensive perspective, where you're getting more looks, you're getting more fast-paced sort of runs.
For sure, because you're going to get the ball back, right? Like, even if you miss, you're going to get that ball back, for sure. No, for sure, yeah. So I feel like it's kind of hot and cold, right? Like, you're either on or you're off. you may not have a comeback there, so.
Definitely. Interesting point in regards to sort of the difference of the youth athlete sort of realm now to when you came up. With the prevalence of sort of high school teams, club, like different travel teams and the like, and so much hyper specialization between youth athletes. Like, what are your thoughts on how different the system is now to when, say, you came up, as well as specialization as a whole? Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing, somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, no, I mean, so when I was getting recruited to college, I had only played club, I think, for 1 year. Like there was not, I mean, there was a club option, but I was too busy doing other things to really be bothered with club. It definitely wasn't why I got recruited. And I tell a lot of my students today, I'm like, if you want to get recruited, go to their college camp, because if you go to the college camp, like, not only are you on campus getting to meet the coaches and interact with them, you're on the campus eating their dining food, like, you're getting a better sense of everything, and they're
You're getting
evaluating
experience.
and they're evaluating for more than 15 minutes of whatever tournament you're at, right? And I think, the recruiting went super, super fast, where like eighth graders and like people that were barely 14 were getting recruited. And now it's slowed down a little bit more for like 16. But I also think there's a huge benefit to multi-sport athletes, not only because are they gaining that knowledge from like being a basketball player or a soccer player, but they're also not draining their body of the same motion over and over again. Like, I think if I would have played lacrosse and only lacrosse in college, or I mean high school, and maybe before high school, I would be burnt out by now. But I think with the fact that I didn't start playing girls lacrosse until my freshman year in high school probably gave me a leg up on other people, because I didn't have that burnout sensation like I know many others did. So yeah, I'm huge into multi-sport. I think it's just good for your brain too. Like, take a break.
100%. And like that goes back to what we were talking about before, of that sort of year off period where when the sport switches from I'm doing this for fun to, okay, this is now serious. I have to be at this level. I have to be doing this, this, and this. And it becomes less fun, less personal, more business. That's that big distinction. And I feel that hyper specialization brings that point maybe from a 15, 16-year-old, brings it down to 14, brings it down to 13. And you see a lot of these, like, I guess, very serious sort of like youth camps and the like with like 8, 9-year-olds. And it's like, when I was 8 and 9, I was playing on a playground still. Like, I was kicking a random ball that we had found in a park, like not doing anything too serious.
Yeah.
And that freedom of development definitely changes when you get put into a system with like structure and rigid rules, and you have to be here and do this. And exactly, that's all you know. You don't have that creativity. And for some things, I feel it can be a little bit of a positive in terms of, say, maybe something like an Olympic track and field event or something like that, where it is quite linear and specializing a little earlier, but still participating in other things is an overall net positive.
Yeah.
But for something like a very open skill like lacrosse, like most sports, rather than an event, that's where that universal, like if I'm playing basketball, I'm going to be able to draw a lot of things from that will help me play lacrosse. Being able to read pick and rolls, being able to read angles.
Yeah, I think I actually remember a study actually done, I think more in the UK, about their soccer programs, and like their ability to predict who would be the all-stars based on like their younger talent was basically awful. Like they think having their 8 or 9-year-olds being able to pick that. But I pretty much tell my kids, I'm like, if you're a stud in middle school, you're probably not going to be good in high school and college, because you've developed a little bit too early and you're just dominating at a level when people are not physically ready yet. So I mean, totally, like I don't get the whole sports specialization thing, especially when you're still going through puberty and maturity. And I can't imagine it's good for your body in general. Like, different movements are great for your body, so doing the same sport over and over again, but then also just, your point, mentally and creativity wise, and being able to kick a ball and play a game of fake tag or whatever it is just so important to the development of our youth.
For sure. I think it's quite interesting, even from like a psychological perspective there, of if you are that under 14 that's way bigger than the competition, that is just dominating physically, let alone from sort of a skill perspective, how that weighs up on your sort of psychological development of, like I'm the best, I just dominate, like, and you don't get that sense of I need to work hard and that's the equalizer, versus someone that may not be as physically talented, may still be good, but not at that same level as the early developer. And then they learn that work ethic through trying to basically level that gap there. And that is like that sort of chip on your shoulder isn't something that necessarily just goes away. Even once you start having success, like for some people it does, for some people it doesn't. But for those that it doesn't, continually trying to basically close that imaginary gap at that point is what get a lot of them to be the best they can. Like, you look at Michael Jordan, was cut from varsity.
Yeah.
and the level of competitor he is, that didn't sit with him. Even when
Yep.
he was hitting game-winning shots at UNC in his college career, like, still didn't matter. Still
Yeah.
was working, still was working. And I feel that that's one of those sort of almost beneath the surface differences between those two athletes, and why that being sort of a mid to late bloomer essentially can be a very beneficial thing for overall development and like the overall potential that you might reach.
For sure, because if you're dominating, like, you're not going to go and use your weak hand. Like, no one does. Don't tell me they do, because they're too young to realize they need to do that, right? So they
Exactly.
get overconfident. And to your point, even like Steph Curry, right? Like, he's overcome so many things, and yet here he is. So, but yeah,
100%.
I would totally take an underdog any day for sure.
Love it. Working with obviously a big sort of range of ages for athletes. Like, you're a primary school teacher, aren't you, or a PE teacher?
Yeah, primary
Yeah.
teacher. So I work with kindergarten, so like 5-year-olds to about 12-year-olds, and then I coach at the high school. So then, I got like my 14-year-olds to 18-year-olds, and then I work with a couple of college kids too. So literally the whole spectrum, the whole gamut.
That's awesome. How do you feel your verbal sort of coaching and the drills you use change from such a obviously very different overall focus, but from such a young age to up to the college where they're near pro level? How do you feel that sort of has to be modified from your own perspective there?
So I think the first thing is what I want. I want all my players or students to be successful in whatever they're doing. So you think like a T-ball recommend, right? Like if you're playing baseball at like a high level, you have a really fast pitcher, really small ball, normal bat, wooden bat. But if you're just teaching a 5-year-old how to hit a baseball, you're using probably a bigger ball, a huge bat, so they can be successful, but they're still learning that range of motion. And I think, at a younger age, when maybe we're not even teaching lacrosse, I mean, just a simple game of tag, you're learning the skill of evading and juking and also reading what your other person's doing. So it can be very fun and learning at a very young age, but also still give them those skills that will eventually translate into as you get older. And as you get older, I feel like I try to set them up more into where they're going to be successful, where they kind of have to find the solution within the realm of questions. Whether it's a 5v4 continuous drill, you give them no rules other than you've seen the boundaries, here's what it is, and you're looking for something specific. So giving a little bit of challenge, but again, in a situation where they can always be successful, I think is probably one of the most important things.
I think that's awesome. Like, obviously a very big focus on sort of more play elements for the kids, where you put them in if you called it a drill, it would be completely over their head.
No.
You go, all right, guys, we're going to go out, we're going to do this, and we're going to hit this, we're going to tag each other or something. And it's essentially working the exact same things that you are in that more sort of progressed version with those older, like, college athletes. But you've given them completely different outlooks on what they're doing to achieve the best example or best result for each sort of demographic there. And very heavy on the constraint-based coaching, which I think is awesome. We're having obviously a conversation about that a while ago, but I think it's a very big thing that allows you to modify your coaching style to be successful with both audiences there, which is awesome.
Yeah. So for me, as long as it resembles the sport, or I guess what you will eventually be competing in, I think is again, in addition to being successful, is also really important when we're talking about our drills, right? Like, and going back to the T-ball, like, I don't know if I'd ever want to have a kid just hit off the tee, because that's not what happens, right? Like, you always have someone throwing an object at you. So whether it's like a dodgeball and you're just trying to catch it, or whether it's a big ball and you're just trying to hit it with a stick, something that, always emulates the game that you want to play, regardless of age, is super important.
Exactly. Just like the skill is sort of here to here, and you're working on a progression from a very low end, and where they are technically competent, then progressing until you're at that top end, and you go, all right. It's almost, you have very little constraints, you bring more constraints in, and then you remove those constraints again.
Totally.
I think it's quite an interesting sort of paradigm that creates.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You're right. You introduce a lot, they start figuring it out, and then you start relaxing them a little bit, and it almost makes it more challenging for them again, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree completely there. All right. Final question to wrap up now. What advice would you have given to yourself 5 years ago? You can make it 5 to 10. I'm happy for you to choose either of those.
Well, I think we kind of touched
No
on it
pressure.
a little bit, but I think I would go back, and 10 years is kind of when I started the U.S. team a little bit. I started a little bit before then, But I think I would tell myself just to have fun with it. I think I, trained in the wrong ways. I think, lacrosse players in general are told to run, but like as a goalie, it's not something that like makes sense. Like I'm never running.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I couldn't train in ways like I'm really big into pushing and pulling your own body weight right now. Like I'm trying to do pull-ups, push-ups, burpees, anything that's really like explosive but with your own body weight, because that's what I'm doing in cage, right? So focusing on that, but then again, going back to it, just have fun. Like, you can't control what the coaches are going to pick. You can't control what the opponents are going to do. The only thing you control is like what you're doing and in the moment, your reactions. So really to have fun with it and to kind of enjoy the ride as you're on it.
I think that is some awesome advice from a very knowledgeable perspective there as well.
Yeah, you have to fail a lot to know a lot, right? I think that's the biggest thing.
Exactly. But, I mean, is a fail ever really a fail if you learn something from it? Is that not necessarily a positive experience later down the line?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, again, going back to that young kid in middle school or high school and they want to be the best, and you tell them, well, are you prepared to let in, about 20,000 goals? Because that's probably what's going to happen in your career. And getting that perspective of every time a goal goes in, what are you learning from it? What did you do? What did you not see? How could you do better? And that growth mindset we talked about is just so important.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on Coach's Q&A, Liz. I really appreciate it. I'm sure all the people that have been watching have got some awesome insights from you as well. And we'll definitely have to tee up another one soon. Yes.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with your game.
Awesome. It's going to be interesting. We've got a few injured players, but we'll do what we can. You go out, you make the most of it.
Yes, for sure.
Too easy. If you've got any socials or anything coming up you want to plug, feel free as well.
I got nothing coming up, but next time you want to have me on, you let me know, and I look forward to it. So
awesome. Well, everyone follow the US team coming up because I'm sure you'll be on there.
Hope so.
I got faith.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Too easy. Have a good one. I'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.